Hi folks, how's it going? Over our past few sessions and on our member channel, we've been doing some work on punching recently. The thing is though, there's no real punches in Systema. But hang on, you just said you've been doing punching, but now you're saying there's no actual punches in Systema. Well, let me explain. If we think about most styles, not all but most styles, we might be throwing a jab, we might be throwing a reverse punch, we might be doing a turn and chop with the fist or hammer fist. We're doing a specific movement for our punch. It's given a name, the way the fist is angled, the way everything lines up, it's very specific to that technique. As we know in Systema, we work more from a principle base rather than technique. So none of the movements have names. Instead, your punch comes out of the movement. We can see this particularly when we get into figure eight work and when we get into weapons work. And that to me increases that idea, or perhaps supports that idea of the empty hand stuff, or a lot of it coming from weapons work. Because of course originally on a battlefield you'd like to think that people had a weapon and weren't fighting with their bare hands. That is pretty common across most cultures, I would think. There's some people say, for example, that a lot of the Chinese arts, Tai Chi and Xingyi, come from using the spear. So, you know, no doubt there's a debate to be had there. But the issue is that we don't punch as such, but the punch is just a part of our general movement. One tool that we use, one method that we use for developing punches is the sledgehammer. And again, we can perhaps draw a line between this and working with the sword. And if we use the sledgehammer, it becomes quite apparent where the punches are, or where they seem to be. So if I'm doing a movement like this, for example, from here out to here, then we can see there's a punch. If I do a movement from here, then maybe to here, again we can see there's a punch, there's a punch. So then what tends to happen is when people exercise or do the movement with or without the hammer, they put the emphasis at that end point. Now this is okay to some extent. This is part of the reason for using the sledgehammer. You know, you've got that weight and that instability that you have to support at that extended position. Of course, if you're delivering a strike, then that translates very nicely. That's where you apply your hit. But we don't want to get too trapped in that way of thinking, because the thing is, if I look at this movement without the sledgehammer, so we're going from here to here. So this is a punch, but so is this, and 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 so on and so on. So really the idea is, at any point in that movement, you should be able to apply the strike, whether it's with the shoulder or the elbow or whatever it is. So what we're really looking at when we work these movements is building partly, initially, that kind of pulse at the end, because we want to have good support for our strike. But really, when you do these exercises, that pulse should be held throughout. So I'm applying the tension throughout. So rather than this, there's the stop, I'm trying to get that continuous throughout the movement. I do the breathing loud to exaggerate so you can hear it. But the support is applied throughout the movement, not just at the end of it. This means that then when I do any movement, I should have the ability to bring the strike out at whatever point I am, at whatever angle I happen to be. And of course this is pretty straight line, but once you start working into figure eight and all the rest of it, and putting some spirals in, then that increases your ability to strike from odd angles. And of course when you shorten that down into working very close in, then you've still got that ability to develop power at very short range. So let's look at how this works against the person, and then we talk about how we can use it in sparring and testing and everything else. So we've got this movement. As I said, at any point in this movement we can use it to strike the other person. So depending on what I'm getting from him, just to illustrate this one, we'll work on the inside of it, and if you just throw something in, so here and here. So these are very simple movements. As I said last month, just keep things very simple. It's just very basic movements, but of course how you deliver it is the important thing. So again, on the member channel we've been talking about this idea of integrating the whole body together. So I'm not like standing here and doing this, but there's just that little step in, that little shift. So we've got that whole body weight coming up behind that. It's I realise it might look one thing, and because I'm showing a specific movement, I'm sort of doing what I say we don't really do. But in actual use, this isn't a thought of, right, it's coming in, I'm going to set myself up, look then, boom, I can throw in an uppercut there. This is me just moving out of the way of that, and as I move, the hands are working. If I'm doing my sledgehammer work or my figure eight or this kind of stuff, so it doesn't have to be this, it could be something like this, it could be here and here. Basically, once I start moving, I'm not thinking about punching like this. I'm just thinking about moving, and he just happens to be in the way. Wherever this fist is going, if he's in the way of it, if he moves out of the way, then I'll just keep moving. I don't, if he moves out of the way, boom, boom, right? I'm not throwing punches, I'm just moving. So that's the first thing. So you have a little play around. Just think of this up and down movement first if you want to just work with that. You know, it can come here, you can come down, it doesn't matter. But you have to have your positioning right as well. That's no good. I'm always using movement as my first thing. My movement is my defence. If I get caught, maybe I've got that there, but I'm always positioning myself so that wherever I throw my arm out, I'm going to hit it. I'm not thinking, here specifically, I've got that. I'm just moving. As I move, if I just throw something out completely at random, I've hit him, I've hit him, I've hit him, because he's in my flight path.
Yeah, so he's got no time to think either, and then even if you don't get the sweet spot, at least you're giving him something to think about.
You've got something, yeah. So then we look at how that works in the sparring and the testing, and how you use it kind of more for real as well. So when it comes to sparring, well, there's a couple of things to differentiate. There's sparring and there's testing, and then there's doing like scenarios. A couple of different things. Because generally in sparring, as we see, we're going backwards and forwards. We set up an exchange. So I might do something, he does something. Now that might be like you come in and throw a couple of hits, boom, boom, right. Now I come in,
sorry, here you go.
And I throw a couple of hits. So there's that type of sparring. There's the type of sparring where we want to set up a continuous flow, which is good for developing this work because, see, you've got a hit. That's it. Wherever you've got an opportunity, boom, you're hitting. So you're learning to work from those odd angles. So the aim of that type of sparring is to get a flow working and break away from this idea of if we're testing or if we're doing scenario work. Now the thing is, again, is situations, if I wait for that, it's already too late. I'm not saying you can't deal with that, because we have methods, right, of well, everything's damage limitation. So if he does catch me by surprise, then hopefully at least I'll maybe get something going there. But then I can't reset from this. 1 second. Except in martial art tutorials. Right. I've got to, even if he catches me, I've got to be able to work from that position. But the reality is, if he's coming in, I'm going straight there.
Smothering him.
Yeah, I'm not waiting for that. This kind of thing. And look, I'm set up. this is just part of my movement. There's there, everything else. I'm not thinking left jab, right hook, weave the shuttles, creep down like a snake, you know. I'm just moving. And the reason I'm moving is because I'm scared, because I don't want to get hit. So I could move this way and maybe create space. But if we're in that position, then I'm moving. I've got the chin, I've got the knee, I've got the kidney in one movement. So that's the way you develop this. It's a different approach from thinking we're here, right, and now we're going to, this is fine, you can learn a lot of things from this, but this is not what I want to do if I'm confronted with someone who's really trying to punch my head off. As soon as I get that feeling I'm in danger, I'm closing in or I'm creating space. And this closing in now, I have the ability to hit on the move as I'm closing in. I'm not having to rely on being in a stance or throwing the perfect jab or hook or chain punch or whatever it is, you know, because that's when things start going wrong. I try and throw the perfect technique, and real life being what it is, I slip. Doesn't matter if I slip, I can still do something, you know. I'm a bit drunk, never happens. Probably better. You always drive better when you're drunk. I drive better when I've had 6 whiskeys. You know, I'm more relaxed. Don't try that. There's a few ideas then for developing this flow hitting rather than hitting, staccato hitting, I suppose we could call it. And of course there's a ton of other stuff we put into that as well. How you position yourself, getting the angle of the strike, developing the power and all the rest of it. Of course, that's all going up on the member channel at the moment, so if you want access to all of that instructional content, just click the join button below for details. And I think 2 things to take away from this are, 1, to develop this idea of flow in your work. Doesn't matter if it's punching, kicking, grappling. Of course, a lot of good grappling schools have elements of flow built in and flow drills. The other thing is this idea of when we go into fear reaction, normally this kind of thing, we need to change that into a fear response. So even if we get caught on this inhale, this kind of stuff, start working that into your inhale and then your exhale into your movement. But that's another subject for another time. As always, if you've got any comments, questions or suggestions, then pop them down below. I'll do my best to answer. If you haven't already, please do like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.